Hello and welcome to my video on the clinch. The first thing I would like to do in this video is just clarify what the clinch is. The clinch is anytime two opponents are on their feet, they're standing up and they have to deal with each other's weight. So different to striking where we're not touching each other until we're hitting each other in the face, the clinch we always had to deal with each other's weight. Now, the thing to know about the clinch is it's comprised of a variety of grips, a variety of neutral and dominant grips. This comes in various forms for different sports, but there are the big four we're going to start off with for this instructional, where most of the action is going to happen. If you ever want to call yourself a master of the clinch, you must understand these gripping systems and be competent in all of them. So the first of these neutral positions is the collar tie, and it's really characterized by he's got one hand on the back of my neck, I've got a hand on the back of his neck, I've got an arm on his elbow, and he's got an arm on my elbow. Comes in a few different variations, but this is the basic collar tie that you must know. The second neutral position that we're going to talk about is the over-under position. Basically, I have one arm underneath of his armpit, he's got one arm underneath my armpit, and we both have a grip on the tricep. You can't really see it in this picture, but both of these guys have a grip on the tricep. It's called the over-under position because I have both an overhook and an underhook, and my opponent has an overhook and an underhook. Now, the first dominant position is the evolution of the collar tie. It's called the tie clinch. So now, instead of both of us having an arm on the back of the head, only I have an arm on the back of the head. So I have two arms on the back of his head. This position is very dominant, especially for knee strikes. It's really known for throwing powerful knees from this position. So the next position we're going to talk about, the next dominant position, is the double unders. And the double unders is kind of like the evolution of the over-under. Only now, instead of us both having an arm underneath the armpit, only I have arms underneath. I have two underneath. So I really have good control of his hips and center of gravity. Really powerful position for launching high amplitude throws. Now the double unders comes in a variety of forms. Here's an example of double unders from the back. So he has two arms underneath of his opponent's armpits, but he's on the back of his body instead. It's much more common in wrestling, although it does happen in real fighting, but in wrestling, you really don't want to turn your back to the mat, so it's exposed and easy to grab around. We'll be covering this position as well. Just know it is not as likely to happen as the double unders from the front position that we just talked about. Let's start off this instructional with my favorite collar tie technique, starting off with this standing guillotine choke. Hey, if I can choke you out in the first 10 seconds from a collar tie position, I'm going to try it. It's low committal for me. I usually try this one early on in the match. Now, what I'm going to do is bring the hand that was on his elbow to the back of his neck. I twist with a twist of my hips and a twist of my shoulders. And when I do that, his collar tie is released for a split second. So I have a little bit of an opening there to take that guillotine. I bring that right arm around and I lock it up for a nice high elbow guillotine. Hey, you know, choke him out, get him done, and that's it. Next up, let's look at a classic duck under. Now, what you do is you wait till the opponent pushes on you. When the opponent pushes on you, you're going to push at the elbow. So your palm is right underneath of his elbow. You push up and you curl your head back once it clears his tricep. Curling your head back makes it so that he cannot pull his tricep back, so it's stuck. I drop to both knees for this one, and I maintain a grip on the back of his neck as I drop and I spin. That drop of weight and that arm on the back of his neck with a spinning force is what takes this person down. Alright, so next up, let's take a look at one of my favorites. This is an ankle pick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to force him to take a step. And I do that by dragging my left leg back in a circular motion and turning hard with my hand. So I'm really trying to force him to take a step. When he takes that step, I'm going to reach down with the arm that was on his elbow. I drop to my knee, I grab his foot, and I want to grab his foot so low that my pinky is touching the mat. The lower you can grab, the better. I'm going to pull with the hand that's on his foot, and I'm going to push with the arm that's on his head, so I get a nice scissoring effect, and I get a beautiful ankle pick takedown. I have spent years trying to perfect this technique. This is De Ashi Barai, also known as the foot sweep. The trick is in the timing. You've got to get him stepping in a way where right when his left foot becomes right, the second where he transfers all of his weight from his front leg to the back leg, that's where you sweep him. So you'll notice I use a golf club foot. I push through his leg, and I do a twisting motion with my hand. So my elbow, the hand on his elbow is pulling down, the hand on his head is pushing to the right, and I kick through that leg. Now let's take a look at switching from a neutral position, that collar tie, to getting a dominant position, which is that tie clinch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that little foot sweep from before to get there. So what I do is I trip him with that foot sweep, and he's not going to go down, but what happens is he loses his balance for a split second. And when he does that, he gives me a little opening where I can switch my left hand from his elbow to the back of his neck for that double collar tie, and now I have the tie clinch. I have now transitioned from a neutral position to a dominant position, and now I can start to do a lot of damage, and now I'm in control. The main star of the tie clinch is definitely these knees. What you want to do with those is you want to pull his head into the knee itself, so you get the combination of two trains coming together. I'm not really doing that here much on Corey because he's my buddy and we're just doing this for instructionals. But if this was a real situation, man, you're really pulling that head into the knee as best you can. Another thing I really like to do is I like to put in foot sweeps to set up the knee. So I'll do a little sweep. That'll off-balance him for a second. Now he's really vulnerable for a knee. So watch, trip and knee. I trip, he's off balance. There's a big knee. Now from that tie clinch, if it feels like I can't hold him anymore and he's really posturing up, I'm just going to let him go, and I'm going to go under for a double leg takedown. So you'll see here, I get the clinch. He tries to posture up. I shoot in nice and deep on my double leg takedown. It can be very surprising, especially if you let go right as he thinks he's about to battle some resistance standing up. He'll come up quicker than he thought he was going to, and he gives you a good opening for you to go underneath for a nice double leg tackle. All right, next up, let's talk about over-under techniques. You should know that I'm mostly an over-under type of fighter. Most of my takedowns come from over-under, so I have a lot more over-under techniques than I have collar tie techniques. And this one is very popular. I like to use this one a lot. This is drop seonagi. What you want to do is get him pushing on you. So I'm going to give him a little push. I push him forward, and when he pushes back on me, I drop to my knees right in between his legs. I flex my bicep like I'm flexing a muscle at a beach around his arm, and I'm going to drop forward at the waist, drop to my knees, and then roll him forward. Very good technique. Make sure he's pushing on you, or it's not going to work. He's got to be pushing on you first. Then you can go for it. All right, so this is Osoto Gari. It means major outer reap, and you'd probably learn it on like your first day of judo class. What I'm going to do is take a little side step that he follows with me. All of a sudden, I burst forward. So I step forward with that left leg, and I wrap my right leg around his hamstring to hamstring, and I kick all the way back. Remember, it's a reap, so I don't just trip him over the leg. I really pull that leg to the back, almost like I'm doing a single leg deadlift. I push with my underhook, and I pull with my overhook, and I get a nice takedown there. So next up, we've got another classic judo throw, and it happens in wrestling all the time as well. This is ogoshi. What I like to do with this one, I put my foot past his leg. I put my hip past his hip. I hinge at the hips a little bit, and then I drive forward, and I get the hip throw. So this one, it's really important that you use your hip almost like a base for him to fall over. And I'm really pulling down with the tricep there, so the hand that's on his tricep, I'm pulling down. And the arm that's on his underhook, I'm kind of pushing over the top so that he falls over that hip. That fall becomes like a pivot point for his entire body, and you can throw him down to the mat with that. Really a classic, sets up a lot of more advanced throws as well. This one here is my choice of weapon if I want to throw someone a lot bigger than me. This is Haraya Gosh, also known as the sweeping hip throw. Basically, it's a little bit of Ogoshi meets Osoto Gari. What I'm going to do is step in similar to the Ogoshi, but I'm not going to put my hip past his hip. I'm going to swing my right leg forward, then kick it back as hard as I can so that my hamstring hits his quad, and I'm going to pull with my overhook and push with my overhook to get a beautiful judo throw here. Really aesthetic one if done correctly. The next move that we're learning is a variation of the last move we looked at, where instead of going around both legs with the sweep, we go inside of one thigh. This is Uchimata, known as the inner thigh throw. I use the same kind of footing as the last one, only I'm going to stop in the middle of his legs, kick my right leg to the back. I pull down with my overhook and I push with my underhook for a scissoring effect, and I get a beautiful throw that works really well if you have nice long legs. My instructor Dave Roy showed me this one, and it's been one of my favorites ever since. This is my first version of an inside trip. What you do is it's kind of similar to the ankle pick from the collar tie in that we want him to step. Only the way I do this is a little bit different. I'm just going to pull on his lat. If I pull on his lat really nicely with really enough force, it'll make him step, and I can feed my right leg inside of his legs, drive forward, and there's a beautiful trip there. He steps, I drive forward, and I trip. I like to put my hand on the mat as a way to kind of brace myself for the impact, because it can be a lot, and it can be a lot of torque on your hip. So just be careful with this one, but it's one of my favorites. Next up, we've got another version of an inside trip. This one I do when I really notice my opponent is lowering his stance and putting weight onto his back leg. When he does that, I'm going to wrap my lead leg around his lead leg, and I'm going to fall forward for another version of an inside trip. Really nice one. Make sure that when you do it, you really commit your weight to going forward. If you just wrap the leg and hope for the best, you will fall and you look like an idiot. So make sure drive through your opponent with this one. Alright, y'all, this is a double leg sweep. What I'm going to do is take a step to the side with a bend in my knees. I'm going to straighten my legs and get him light on his toes. So get him light, and now what I can do is I can use the top of my thigh, like knee area, to sweep both of his legs at the same time. I'm trying to get him right up on his tippy toes, and I'm trying to just push my knee through that all the way. This is the double leg sweep. I actually made this one up myself, so when I made it up, I called it a Tommy two-shoe, because you just kind of knock the two shoes away. What you really have to do is harness the power of your legs, though, to make him light for just a second. Make sure to push your knee through all the way. And I like to try to land right in side control. I like to push his legs out of the way and come down right into a nice side control when I finish this particular throw. All right, my friends, so similar to how we used the foot sweep to go from a collar tie to a tie clinch, we're going to use the same exact principle and almost the same exact technique to get into the double underhooks. What I'm trying to do is make him take a step, I block that step, and then he trips a little bit. When he loses his balance for that split second, I'm going to bring the hand that was the overhook and try to turn it into a underhook so that I can establish this dominant double under position. Probably one of my favorite positions. I mean, for throwing, this position is hard to beat. Now, the first thing I like to try when I get someone in double unders is I go for this bear hug fold. And what I do is I bring my grip low on his back. I get a nice tight gable grip, and I try to suck his lower back into me as my chest pushes his chest down towards the floor. So there's a nice scissoring effect. That's a big concept in a lot of these throws, guys, is that scissoring effect. I pull his hips towards me, I push my chest down, and I start to slowly walk him down to the ground. And if done correctly, I can go right to mount. Double under sacrifice throw. And what makes something a sacrifice throw is your weight is going to fall to the ground before your opponent. And you're going to try to use that fall of weight to drag your opponent down with you. Now, what you're going to do is position your head so that's tight on the side of his chest. You maintain your double underhooks. You wrap one leg around both of his legs. You fall back. And then you wrap your other leg on top to finish the throw. Very important, I wrap around both of his legs so that as I come up to wrap on top, his legs are useless to defend. And I'm using my head on the side because I'm going to use it as like a third arm to push him over my legs and get the fall and get the nice takedown that I'm looking for there. Very easy one to use, especially if you have those double underhooks. Now, as I was referencing to earlier, you can get a double under position from the back. So what I do is I get my head out from underneath of his arm, I get all the way to his back, and now I've got a nice, tight, really dominant position. Usually this happens almost, more in wrestling, but it can happen in a real fight. It can happen in the exact same sequence that I'm showing you here. I just pop my head out and go for the throw. We're going to look at another version of the sacrifice throw that's even more effective than the last one. I'm going to wrap my leg around both of his legs still. I fall back, I drag him down with me, and I get on top for a nice back mount. I can start attacking for rear naked chokes and such if he just stays there on his stomach. 1, 2, I get the back, I fall, and it's almost the exact same technique as the last move that we were looking at. When I say that this double under position is good for high amplitude throws, I'm mainly talking about this one. I just call this a power bomb. It works from the front double unders, but it's most effective when you get all the way on the back. What I'm going to do is get double underhooks on his back, and I'm going to drive my hips as close as I can to him, shoot them forward, kind of like I'm doing a deadlift, the same kind of hip hinging, explosive lift that you would use if you were lifting a really heavy dead weight lift. And I'm going to drive him, pick him up, and just slam him onto the ground. You would be surprised at how much weight you can lift if you really get that explosive hip movement down. You really get your hips into the right position. Great move, happens all the time in wrestling, but you could use it in a real fight as well to really put an exclamation point on your dominance with this one. And boom. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about moves that are more grappling specific because these start from this type of grappling wrestler stance. You don't use this stance in a real fight, but because of the rules in grappling, wrestling, these kinds of things, it makes more sense to use these stances. So a lot of takedowns stem from using this stance. This is just a classic two people standing in the same stance. Usually wrist fighting is what happens here first. So now here's an example of that. This is just, we were wrist fighting. This is the first double leg I ever learned. You'll notice we're in that low position, those stances you would really only use for grappling. And I'm trying to get a hold of both of his wrists. I'm trying to throw his wrists up and shoot in on my double leg so that he can't defend. So I get wrist control. I throw both of his arms up into the air. I shoot in, and I finish up a nice double leg. This is the first really setup for the double leg I ever learned. And it still works. I'll still use it in tournaments and training, even with higher level people. It's just a really good one still. Great one to know for your arsenal. It's great just to teach the basic double leg is this one right here. Definitely my favorite grappling specific throw. It's an arm drag into a low sweep and then a back take. So what I'm doing is I'm using like a wax off technique when I see him reach with that arm. I turn it, grab with my right arm on his tricep and pull him down, and I'm going to try to block his foot with my foot. My number one throw for submission wrestling. I really, really like it. But notice once again, it comes from that low, almost grappling stance. You wouldn't really use this one in a real fight. Or arm drags anyways, you wouldn't really use in a real fight. I mean, you could, but it's going to be tough and you're really at risk for getting hit on the other side. But when it comes to straight grappling, I love this one. Now, a dominant grip position. While the last grip position we looked at was more neutral, this is more of a dominant grappling specific position. This is the Russian tie. What I'm doing is I'm holding his arm like a big sub, and I'm creating an opposition by pulling my arms up and pushing my chest down. That opposition effect is what's going to keep his arm in place right there. And from this position, we'll be launching a variety of takedowns. It's great for grappling specifically, but in a real fight, he could still punch me with that left hand, so that's a big problem when getting this position. Now, there's a wide variety of ways to set up a Russian tie, but I usually do it when he grabs the back of my head on a collar tie, and I'll almost set it up the same way I set up that guillotine. And what I'm going to do first is hit this Russian tie sweep. So what I'm doing is almost like Haraya Ghosh. I'm going to get the Russian tie, step in front of his leg, and hit my hamstring to the top of his quad and just keep going for a nice sweep. It's really a nice one, especially if the guy's a little bit shorter than you. You have longer legs. And it's pretty surprising, too. I mean, it's not a very orthodox one, but it's really one of my favorites if you can get it. Now, perhaps the most fundamental move for the Russian tie position is that basically you got to know that if you get a Russian tie, he's going to try to pull his arm back. And when he tries to pull his arm back, you have an opportunity to shoot in on a nice double leg. So I get the Russian tie. He's going to try to bring his arm back, so his weight is going backwards. If you suddenly drive forward, so his weight's going backwards, and you suddenly push into it a little bit more, his force will be used against him, and you have a great opportunity to shoot in on a double leg takedown. It's really nice, too, because you'll be kind of on the side of him, and you can pinch his knees together. It's easy to pinch someone's knees together when you come at them laterally. It's not so easy when you come at them from the front. Next series of takedowns we'll be doing here is MMA-specific takedowns because they start from this MMA stance and they take into account striking. So they respect the opponent's ability to strike and they use strikes to set up the takedown. We'll be looking at two takedowns in particular, the double leg and the single leg. What takedown I go for is going to depend on the position of my opponent relative to me. So on the right, you'll see that Anderson has his right leg forward and his opponent has his left leg forward. So their lead legs are very close. Over here, you'll see that Anderson and his opponent both have their right leg forward. So if it's the situation on the right, I'm going to shoot for single legs because his lead leg is so close. If it's this situation that you're seeing here with both legs in the front, I'm going to use a double because his hips are more square and easy to get. We're going to start this off with a jab to the double leg takedown. And usually, the real purpose here is to get his guard distracted up high so I have the opportunity to shoot in for my double leg takedown here. I'll really use this one if I notice he's using a lot of the front shield. So if I jab and he brings his forearms together so he's blinded for a second, that's when I'll go in for this double leg. Probably the most basic way of teaching the concept of first striking and then going in for your double leg. So getting his distraction high so that you can shoot him down low. Once you get the jab down, my preferred way to do it is with the right hook. It just lines up my hips in such a way that a double leg is really easy, and it gets me closer to my opponent. The jab kind of keeps you a little bit further away, but a right hook will get you, or a lead hook, I should say, will get you in nice and close. Same concept, finishes a little bit different. I use a little bit more of an angle with this one because I'm so much deeper in on the shot. Right hooks are also, lead hooks are much scarier than jabs too, so people are more likely to block it. So this one is my preferred way to punch my way into a double leg takedown. So this next one here is a snap kick into a double leg, and this one's kind of unorthodox and a little bit weird, but what you got to do is snap kick and then just continue falling forward into your double leg. So after the snap kick, I step my leg as close as I can between my opponent's legs. I drop down to that knee, and I try to finish up the double leg. Unorthodox one, not very easy to see coming. Make sure you get the timing down right if you're going to try it. All right, so next up, we're going to look at single leg finishes. And really, the only strike I use to set up my single legs is a jab, just because that leg is so close. The jab is just such a good weapon to get you there. The first one we're doing is called run the pipe. And run the pipe is a little bit of a misunderstood move. People tend to do this move by twisting their opponent around in a circle. That's not how the move works. You want to grab that leg, step to the side, and push down. When you push down and there's no leg there to support his weight, that base is gone, that's when run the pipe actually works. So I grab that leg and I push down with my chest. This is the first thing I try when I finish a single leg. I'm going to be showing you a couple options to finish the single leg, but this is usually the first one that I give a try to when I grab out that single leg takedown. Now, there's a lot of different ways to finish a single leg. This is one of my favorites. I call it the G sweep, simply because it looks so gangster when you do it. What you're going to do is get that single leg using the jab, pass it in front of your chest, step behind him, sweep the leg, and push with the right arm to create that opposition effect. So I get the arm, I sweep the leg, and I push with my right arm at the same time for a pretty gangster-looking sweep. Really used a lot in like wrestling, Muay Thai, I've seen it used. One of my favorites just because of the cleanness of that sweep that you can get. The high crotch is really an interesting one because it looks like you're just lifting him up by pure strength, but really this is another one of those moves that when done correctly and using the correct positioning of the hips, you'd be surprised at how strong it makes you simply from technique amplifying your strength. So what I do is I set up that single leg just like I did before, and I wait for him to try to push my head to the outside for a guillotine or something. He pushes the head, then I go underneath for that high crotch. So watch, I go for the single leg, I go in, he pushes my head, now I lift up, and I really can get a beautiful high amplitude throw. That's a real crowd pleaser if I hit this high crotch here. Alright, y'all, you got to keep this one on the down low. This is the secret scissor sweep. What you do is you wait until he goes for a single leg on you. Then you drop down for your scissor sweep. One of my most surprising techniques to use on people. People never see it coming. Really, the only thing you got to do is just wait for that single leg, get it to the front, and then go in for that double scissor sweep there. My favorite technique. It's my secret little ninja technique. Don't forget where you heard it from. You got it here first.